Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the fourth annual DEY Summer Institute. My name is Denisha Jones, and I am the co-director of Defending the Early Years, and I'm really excited to kick off our 3-day Summer Institute. So as I mentioned, this is the fourth one. We began in person in Washington, D.C., and have since turned to a virtual format where we do 3 days, 2 hours a day, with a great collection of early childhood advocates, researchers, parents, teachers, and supporters to really talk about a lot of different issues. And so we're really excited for today. And so I'm just going to go over a few things and introduce our panelists. I am not part of today's discussion. I get to be in the background, so I'm really excited for that. But I did want to go ahead and get us started. So today our first panel is called Centering Racial Justice in Early Childhood Education. And briefly, I'm going to introduce our moderator and our 3 panelists and turn it over to them. Tomorrow, we have a 2-part segment. The first is a conversation with Linda Darling-Hammond and myself and Nancy Carlson-Page, which is one of the co-founders of Defending the Early Years. And we're going to be talking about policy, all things policy in early childhood, and how we can all do better advocacy work at the policy level. And then we have a second podcast special. As you know, DEY launched our podcast with Keisha Reed. And so we're doing a special Advocacy in Action podcast video, which we're going to show for the second hour. And then you'll be joined by me, Nancy, and Keisha. And we just want to tell you, you want to join for day 2, because we have a special announcement at the end as well, too. And then our last day on day 3 is also going to be wonderful. I'll be moderating that panel discussion with our 3 guests, where we talk about aligning research and practice in early childhood care and education. Many of you have heard about the amazing research by Dale Farron and other folks about preschool and academics in Tennessee. And so we've invited her along with our podcast host, Keisha Reed, and Carol Garberton-Murray, to talk about their work in early childhood care, along with research and practice. So we hope you will join us for all 3 days. If you cannot, these sessions are being recorded. They're also being live streamed on our Facebook page. So you will get a link to the recordings, and they'll be placed on our website. So you understand that you might not be able to watch all 3 days. Also, a few people have asked about certificates. At the end of each day, I will drop a link in the chat to a Google form. And if you just complete that form with your name and email and let us know which days you attended, we will gladly mail you a certificate of attendance so that you might be able to use that. We do not offer any type of continuing education units, but if the certificate will help you get those, we are more than happy to do that for you. Lastly, please note that there's a Q&A function for the Institute for all 3 days. So please use the Q&A to type questions when we do have a Q&A today, and we do have a Q&A on day 3. We do not have a Q&A on day 2, but please do that. We'll be monitoring the Q&A to get those questions out there as well, too. All right, so I'm very excited to begin. Most of you probably know the amazing Takiema Bunche-Smith. She's been with the Institute. This is her 3rd time now, so we promoted her to moderator because we're very excited. So Takiema is the founder and president of ANASA. Did I say that right? Good. ANASA Consulting, and she's the senior advisor to the Center on Culture, Race, and Equity at Bank Street College. For over 2 decades, Takiema has worked in support of children, programs, and educational systems from her various roles, including teacher educator, parent activist, and executive leader. In 2016, she created ANASA Consulting to provide professional development for educational professionals and leaders who want to deeply understand and dismantle systems of oppression within formal and informal schooling environments. In 2019, Takiema founded the Black Lives Matter at School Early Childhood Symposium to provide a professional development experience for adults to better support Black children to learn and to thrive. In 2021, the symposium garnered 2,000 attendees from across the United States and internationally. The symposium and Takiema's subsequent development of the Journey to NIA program has shown a light on the urgent need to eradicate anti-Black racism and to center Black joy in early childhood. Takiema holds master's degrees in early childhood and elementary education from Bank Street College of Education, urban education policy from the CUNY Grad Center, and leadership from NYU's Wagner School for Public Service. And I participated in multiple of the Black Lives Matter at School Early Childhood Symposiums and her Journey to NIA and work with ANASA Culture. And they are amazing. And I know everything she's saying, but it's so refreshing to hear it from Takiema and to hear her perspective on it. So thank you so much for all that you do and for agreeing to moderate this panel, who I'm going to introduce next.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We have Rukia Rogers, who's the founder and director of the Highlander School. Rukia Monique Rogers has worked with young children and their families for over 25 years, including work as a preschool and toddler teacher, a studio teacher, and a curriculum coordinator. She has been inspired by the education of Reggio Emilia, Bell Hooks, Bettina Love, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and many others who see education as a fundamental right, as well as a catalyst for social change. Rukia is an anti-bias and anti-racist educator committed to cultivating a community full of love. She founded the Highlander School in Atlanta in 2013. I believe if she hasn't been already, she's going to be very soon a guest on our podcast. So make sure you catch her there. I know if you already recorded it, it's going to come out very soon. And she was also featured in the Early Childhood Exchange recently in a wonderful article about the work that she's doing. So thank you so much for joining us, Rukia.
Thank you, Denisha.
Maurice Sykes, author of Doing the Right Thing for Children, 8 Qualities of Leadership and Childcare Justice, Transforming the System of Care for Young Children, is the executive director of the Early Childhood Leadership Institute and a senior associate at M. Russell and Associates in Washington, D.C. He was formerly an associate director at the Center for Urban Education at the University of the District of Columbia, my 2-time alma mater, where he received the Marjorie Holloman Parker Distinguished Educator Award and was recently inducted into the DC Hall of Fame Society for his numerous contributions to the field of early childhood education. I had the pleasure of contributing a chapter to the forthcoming book, Childcare Justice, Transforming the System of Care for Young Children. And it's been amazing to work with Maurice and all the other collaborators. And we were so delighted to have him join us because he's also one of the founding advisory board members to Defending the Early Years. And last but not least, we have Julie Nicholson, is a professor of practice in the School of Education at Mills College, where she has been a faculty member since 2005 and directed several innovative programs, including the Leadership Program in Early Childhood, a joint MBA, MA Educational Leadership Program, and the Center for Play Research. She is also co-founder, co-director of the Center for Equity in Early Childhood Education. Nicholson conducts community-engaged scholarship, and her teaching, research, and publications emphasize issues of social justice and equity in early childhood. She has published widely in a range of peer-reviewed journals and is the lead co-author of 12 books. She regularly presents and provides professional development and coaching to individuals, agencies, school districts, and state leadership teams across the US. Julie, like I said, as soon as Takiema mentioned you, your name started popping up all over, and that's kind of how it works in the early childhood field. So thank you all so much. I'm gonna also just quickly, if you love that song, Gracie's Corner, put that link in the chat for those of you who missed it and didn't know what that was. And I'm gonna turn it over to Takiema and our lovely panel.
Thank you so much, Denisha. This is so exciting. I see so many familiar faces in the chat from different parts of my life, and we are all in community. I'm so excited to be here. So we've already started not being respectful to adult learners. So I'm gonna welcome you to our little corner of the internet and invite you to jump into the chat and say hello, good evening, good morning if you're not in the US. Say your names and maybe what age of children you work with or support or love the most, even though we are not supposed to have favorites really. And then you can also share your pronouns. You can, and if you know the native land that you live on, we'd love to honor and acknowledge that we are all on native land. My name is Takiema Bunche Smith. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm currently sitting on Lenape land in Brooklyn, New York, also known as Do or Die Bed-Stuy. So I'm so excited to be here. I just have to let you know, this is a 2-hour panel, but the way our planning session went, I don't know how much time you have. I don't know if we're gonna get kicked out at 6, but this is going to be a lively, lively conversation, and we want to make sure that you are part of the conversation, that you're not just watching us, because we know just how children learn through interaction is how adults learn. And children don't just learn from the teachers in front of them, they learn from everyone in community. And so that's what we want to do here today. And we know you're also very tired. We're all tired. There is a lot going on, and we've been saying that for quite some time. In fact, in early childhood, we all know that we've been saying there's a lot going on way before the pandemic. And so I just want to acknowledge you are home. You are like, kick your feet up, get some water. We can't see you. But we're going to try to really make this be a meaningful experience and a community building experience, because that's what we need and what we do. So I'm going to just start by a few framing things, so we're really clear about what we're hoping to do and explore here. So the first thing is that I always want to acknowledge the age band or range of early childhood, because we live in a country that sort of acts like early childhood is just until 5. And a lot of us do work with children up until 5. Sometimes we work with 2 to 5-year-olds, but the reality is that developmentally speaking, early childhood is prenatal, birth, to 7 or 8 years old, which in this country, in most cases, goes to 2nd or 3rd grade. And what we want to do is always remember that, recognize, and make sure that our advocacy and our thinking about young children extends to the grades and ages where they actually have even less access to the things that we know are their birthrights: play, creativity, communication, outdoor play, indoor play, hugs, care, right? All of those things. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that early childhood is a bigger span than what we mostly are sort of kind of led to believe. The other thing I want to say is that we have these amazing panelists. And one thing we spoke about was that we're going to be in conversation with one another, not necessarily agreement. Again, you all know that this is the work of early childhood. Everybody is not supposed to all get along or have the same ideas. So we're actually going to try to model that. I have no idea what we're going to disagree about or challenge each other on, but that's what we're going to do so that we can get to the learning together. I really want to invite you all to be curious and to be interactive. I see the chat is going. Keep it going. We'll all practice multitasking the way we've been doing. But be curious, right? If someone says to you is like, oh, that's new, that's different, I don't know how I feel about that, just sit with it. Again, we're modeling for ourselves what we model with children, right? If it's new or different or even uncomfortable, doesn't mean that it's wrong. So let's do ourselves that service of being learners and thinking about how can we listen to learn, and also not to log off and be like, oh, that was a really great panel. We want to log off and be like, what am I doing differently tomorrow, right? So we have to take the theory to the practice and keep it looping, because that's how we're going to get change. That's how we're going to get growth. And that's how we're truly going to serve children. And the last thing that I want to just remind us is that the title of this panel is Centering Racial Justice in Education, in Early Childhood Education. So one guess as to what we are going to talk about very directly and concretely today. We are talking about race, y'all. We're talking about race and racism and oppression and white supremacy and anti-Black rate. We're going to talk about it because when we talk about it, we name it, we understand it, we get to dismantle it. That's the only way, even in early childhood, actually, especially in early childhood. So we're gonna, there's not gonna be a colorblind conversation today, okay? So just gird your loins. But I'm assuming that if you're logged in for this, you're ready, all right? So we're gonna do this. So what I'm gonna ask you now is to go into the chat and share, why are you here today? What are you hoping to get out of it? Set your intention for the next hour and 20 or 40 minutes, right? Why are you here? Why did you log in? And what do you hope to get out of it? We want to hear. So as you start putting your things into the chat, we're going to kind of take our time as panelists and look through them. And we'll probably respond to them, ask questions, right? And then as one of our panelists will share, we're going to pose some provocations to you. Right? Y'all know where that's coming from. If you don't, you're gonna know soon enough. All right, so come on, put it in here, and we are so grateful to join you. All right, so our objectives really are to help us all reflect on the urgency of centering racial justice in early childhood, birth to 8. Right? We want you to consider how what you're hearing can be directly applied to your work and your context. Right? And that's not just if you're a teacher in a classroom or a director of a program. Children learn 24 hours a day. So if we are around children in any way, shape, or form, how are we going to take what we're learning here and apply it directly? And then we're really hoping that you will, actually, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to be strong now. It's the time here is not to be weak. You are going to commit to doing at least one thing to center racial justice in early childhood when you start your new school year. And I know sometimes your school years don't end, but we're going to pretend like they all start in September. Okay. This is, I know how it goes, right? So starting in September, we want you to commit to one thing that you're going to do by the end of this. Okay. We good? Panelists, we good?
We're good.
Awesome. Okay. Great, and I see a lot of things coming into the chat. I see some things coming into Q&A. We are all monitoring it. I see your hearts and your thumbs up, wonderful. And so what I'm gonna do is ask this question, and we're gonna start with Rukia. All you're gonna get the same question. What do you do and why do you do it? What is your why, Rukia?
What is my why? Thank you, Takiema. I'm so excited to be here, engaged in this conversation. Again, I'm an early childhood educator and activist, founder of the Highlander School and director. And as many of you know, directors have many roles. Sometimes I'm cooking, sometimes I'm a substitute teacher. But the most powerful work that I'm engaged in is designing the curriculum in collaboration with families, children, and my colleagues. A curriculum that holds a strong image of children, that is earth-centered, that is engaged in anti-bias and anti-racist work. And in thinking about the why, which has shifted, I would say, in the last 20 years, if I'm honest. It's not just about because I love children. I know that this nation has never really come to terms with our identity in terms of the violence and the injustice that has been committed against Black and brown bodies, from the indigenous genocide to the enslavement of Africans to the continuations of incarceration. We incarcerate more people than any other nation in its entire world. And so that sits with me. And I think very deeply about what is my role in reimagining this world, and not only reimagining and fighting for, as we use in our space, a beloved community, not only from a place of hope and love, but a place from fierce action. So that for me is the why, knowing where we have been, where we still are, and what is my role, what is my power as I come to work every single day in my work with fellow educators and children and families. So that is the passion that keeps me going. It sometimes is overwhelming. If I'm honest, I have to engage and step back from a place of radical care and joy, because we're not always going in a place that I want to when I want it to do. But it's a place that keeps me deeply rooted in the belief that our children, our society deserves something better. And that's what I'm fighting for, and that's my why.
Thank you so much, Rukia. I hope everyone's like remembering all the things that people are saying, because these are going to come up as we go. It's so deep, wonderful. Okay, Maurice, what do you do and why do you do it, Maurice? You're on mute, Maurice.
I'm off mute now and I'm mic'd. And so I said, it's a pleasure to be here and be a part of this great panel. And, you know, I have been at this work for a minute or two. And until you centered that question for us, what is our why? I never thought about it. I just sort of do what I do, you know, from teacher to administrator to director to all of those things. And so I sort of put it all together into what I call my 4 Ds. And so my first why is disassembling structural and systemic racism. And then disturbing anti-Blackness and distributing equitable opportunities and outcomes for all children, and dismantling policies, procedures, practices, and programs that produce inequitable access to high quality, engaging, robust, play-based early childhood programs. That's what I do. That's what I do. Those are my 4 Ds. You hear me? All right.
We hear you. We hear you loud and clear and very organized. And I'm over here trying to write down all these Ds. I'm seeing a lot of hearts and happy, you know, hats in the chat. Thank you so much. Amazing. Why do you do this work, Maurice?
I do it because it's a part of nation building, that from the earliest part of my career, from Pan-Africanism to nation building, it is always to uplift those who are least fortunate. I do it, it's my way of giving back, of having the privilege of being first generation college educated. I do it because these are my people. You know, I do it because it's the done thing. It's what we should all do. And when I hear Rukia talk about, we sort of have this outrage about the conditions under which people have had to live, and particularly when it's racialized. And so I do it to make it right for those who come behind us. And so my 4Ds are my drivers. And those are the pillars that I build my work around.
Thank you so much. I feel like I'm in like a spiritual experience right now, so inspired. Thank you. Julie, what do you do and why do you do it, Julie?
Hello, it is such a privilege to be here. So I'm going to start by saying that as a white, cisgender, middle class, settler, able-bodied woman, I feel this deep sense of both just commitment and responsibility to be here, to show up, to do my teaching, the research that I do, and to center race and anti-racism, recognizing the sense of privilege that I hold and the positions that I hold, whether it's the opportunity I have to write books and shine a light with co-authors on the brilliance of people in our field across this country, to disrupt our senses of things like self-care that is centering a white Eurocentric perspective, and to bring in culturally responsive, anti-racist, equity-centered conversations. But primarily, I want to just say that I hold this privilege while recognizing Bettina Love, who says every single day our young children of color, they walk through the doors of our childcare centers, of our schools, of our organizations, of our systems, and there's a process of spirit murdering that happens. And I feel such a sense of responsibility to disrupt that and do my part every single day to see it, to acknowledge it, and to do what I can to be, as she talks about, an abolitionist teacher, abolitionist leader, to make progress. And I just want to bring attention to there's so many ideas that I am drawn from that inspire me. But this book, We Dare Say Love, Supporting the Achievement in the Educational Life of Black Boys, they talk about a politicized care and recognizing an ethic of care that brings our history of systemic racism front and center, but then brings in love. I want to bring in Bell Hooks' love. That love is not a feeling, it's not a noun, it's a verb. It's having courage, it's leaning in, it's disrupting, it's doing freedom dreaming to imagine equity, love, and justice for all of our children.
Amazing. Julie, you just gave us a whole bunch of names and resources. And I think if we can't get the links to those books and resources during this moment, we'll follow up. We'll, put together a little email or a list, because we are not doing this work on our own. These ideas did not just spring up. We have been inspired. And as we say, we're standing on the shoulders of our ancestors and the folks that are doing this work. And we need to remember that, right? We have to do Sankofa, look backwards to look forwards. Thank you so much. I did find out that the chat is only coming to us, which I wish that wasn't the case, because the chat is lit, as the young people say. Well, maybe not so young, but a little generation under me. And so I did also want to point out that this event is, again, Denisha shared, is streaming on Facebook, and there the comment function is able to be used. And so wherever you feel, but we also do see your hearts and your emojis, and that is a perfect way to communicate as well. Thank you so much. So I am the moderator, so I'm supposed to sit back, except I also have things to say. So I'll be quick. What I want to say is that I am in the business of creating joyful and liberated early childhoods. And I'm doing that by deconstructing white supremacy and anti-Black racism through transformative personal and professional development. So all of us are doing wonderful things. We're going to put all of our links in the chat. Some of these people have written incredible books, have opened schools, have done, right? We're just doing it. So join us, join this movement. We can't wait to build it, right? And we see the urgency that you have, why you came. So this is exactly what gives us hope and joy. And I'm going to tell you why I do this work. I realized that the same conversations that I had as a child, that I had when I taught, that I observed in Black children and other children of different races related to race and racism, have been the same probably since the beginning of this country, right? The beginning 400 and 2 years or 3 years, I can't do math, right? 1619 and before. And so I said, you know what? When I have grandchildren and great-grandchildren, right? So 7 generations ahead is where I will see the change of what we do today. I cannot sit down and just have people research and just have people teach and raise kids and gnash their teeth about white supremacy and non-culturally responsive practices and saying they're too young. Enough is enough. We know that early childhood is the foundation for the rest of a child and a human's life. We understand that what we do is the most important for any human. And so if that's the case, then I want important, powerful, transformative experiences for the children. And I want the adults to be able to be a part of that and creating that and not replicating system of oppression. So I'm part of the solution now. I'm old, I'm tired. I don't want to be working till I'm 100. So we're going to make a big old movement and do this work. So we just want to give you a quick video to look at. It's 1 minute. It is created this amazing pedagogy called Woke Kindergarten by an incredible human named Key Gross. They have YouTube, Instagram, Patreon. I don't ever say that correctly, but that's how I say it in Brooklyn. And so we're going to look at a 1 minute video to get us really jumping in. Okay?
Black Joy, would you rather run through the grass or make a big splash? Would you rather look at the sky or jump really high? Would you rather win in a race or get paint on your face? Would you rather climb up a wall or play with a ball? Would you rather fish in a pond or use a magic wand? Would you rather lay in the sand or play in a band? Would you rather get a little wet or feed a little pet? Would you rather sit in the sun or laugh at someone? Would you rather relax in a pool or find a cool jewel? Would you rather look at a toad or run on a road? Would you rather skate really fast or take a cooking class? Would you rather laugh at the air or give the room some flair? Black joy, black joy, black joy.
Amazing. So we'd love to hear some reactions to that 60-second text into the chat. I see some emojis coming up. And as you're doing that, we're going to start to hear from our panelists. All right. What does centering racial justice look like to you, Rukia? We want to listen.
Yeah, thank you for that, Takiema. And have a couple slides I want to show about our work. I think for us, it's again been a journey because a lot of what we are doing every single day in the classroom, to be frank, we didn't learn in our teacher education. I think in some ways we began focusing on multiculturalism and diversity and being inclusive, but that wasn't enough. We know that children are a part of their world. They're interconnected. They watch, they see, they hear, and they are quite competent and capable of having really deep and profound conversations. So one of the stories we'll share is the children created a mural for Breonna Taylor and George Floyd that is on the wall of our school and part of our now identity as a school. This is a quote from one of the children. She said, as she painted the blue dress on Breonna Taylor, "I want them to know that they are loved." So part of our work in terms of our practices in centering racial justice is acknowledging again that children are aware of what's happening in their world. And just after the uprising a few years ago, our school was closed because of the COVID pandemic. We were reopening and knew that we had saw many of our children taking engage in protests with their families. And we were curious about what meaning they were making of it, especially our white children. Was this a performance? What connections were they making around George Floyd's race and police officers, all these different messages. So we wanted to really get curious. And when the school reopened, and that was a motivating factor for us because it was COVID. We didn't know what was going to happen, but we knew that this work had to be done. So as we reopened, we started with the process of revisiting the children's experiences of them going to the protest. What were they going to say about it? What kind of comments they were going to make about it? We asked them, did they know what was happening? And as you can see in the next slide, they were saying things like Black Lives Matters, don't shoot, but they didn't have quite the information of what had happened to the police. And this is our dance and our belief that our role is that we believe in play as a value. We believe in children having agency, but we also believe there's a place where elders share their knowledge and their wisdom. So we gave the children direct information about the police hurting George Floyd's body, hurting Breonna Taylor's body, and that they died. And we were also very specific that it was because they were Black. And so that was what we held for our practices in centering racial justice, is that we wanted children to have truth, and truth is power and love for us in our work. And before we had these conversations, we sent an email, we sent letters to families about this work. We got responses for them. We developed a small group with the families to engage in these conversations. But again, for us, that is what our work looks like in practice, is truthfulness and honesty in a way that upholds and honors children. So you can see the two girls revisiting their experiences of protesting. You can see Scout saying it says Black Lives Matter, but not quite really sure why they were doing it. And then the educator offering that information. So if you can see in the next slide as well, the children from there, we created a space, or as Maurice offered, a provocation, where we had images of them protesting. We had images of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. It was important to us in our work that we give visibility and voice to Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, who had been murdered, in a compassionate way, in a place for love. And Harper says here, people are putting out signs because the police hurt George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. That's why we were making signs that says Black Lives Matter. And we saw in their work, they were making signs, they were reacting the protest, but from a different place, a place of knowing why, what was happening, and that they had the power and agency and voice to speak out against it. So from there, the children quickly moved from wanting to create the mural and offering gifts to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And this was a year-long project, a project of minis, but again, having this provocation every single day in the classroom, it was there. And again, as you can see in the next slide, the children grew incredible amount of empathy for Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. They wanted to give them their own dinosaurs. They wanted to create them gifts. They wanted to do things that connected them. And I think in a lot of ways, I know we don't humanize the experiences, again, of Black and brown people in our school. It goes back and forth. There are times when it's about 50% white and 50% Black, but this work is just as important for our white children, if not more, than for our Black and brown children. These conversations were taking place, we knew, more so in our Black homes than so in our white homes, and it was extremely important for us. So the children were making gifts, and then you can see, again, in the next slide, that Eve was saying, you know, I drew a rainbow and a star and a unicorn because I wanted her to be happy. And this one is for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor holding hands. Thinking about, again, how do we humanize Black and brown children? So when we celebrate, for example, the Day of the Dead, we would put images of Tamir Rice at the altar. We would put images of Trayvon Martin, children who had perished while being held in custody from ICE. We would put those images on our altar for Day of the Dead. We would invite the children to create gifts for them. So in our practices, it's how do we make sure that when there's racial injustice, that those folks are seen as part of our beloved community, that the beloved community is not just our four walls as well. So again, in the next slide. The children were deciding what they were going to add to the mural. And this is a mural that stands with us. And it's an interesting piece because the children wanted Breonna Taylor and George Floyd more than interesting, powerful. They wanted them to be holding hands. They wanted them to be together underneath a rainbow. And it's a continuous conversation for our toddlers, for our 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds who go back. And then we retell the story over and over again because it's part of our environment now of this is the story of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and this is why it happened, and this is why we created. So that's just a little snapshot of some of the practices of the Highlander School that we take on brave conversations. We do not believe that children cannot have quote unquote uncomfortable conversations. Again, if Black and brown children are experiencing it, certainly white children can talk about it, and we can see the humanity in our members of our beloved communities, such as Breonna Taylor and George Floyd.
Thank you so much, Rukia. This was really powerful. I was writing down a lot of notes of things that I want to remember, but I wanted to invite either Julie or Maurice. Did you all have a response, reaction, or a question for Rukia?
No, I certainly have a comment and a reflection of, just celebrating how you all honor children and, true to Malaguzzi's vision of the child, that seeing children as capable and competent and resourceful, and that you will approach topics that may be uncomfortable and that some people think are too much for young children. But, those of us who lean in and listen to children know a lot. They know a lot before we even talk to them about things that are going on. So when you work with young children, one of the lessons as a beginning teacher, when I got over the fact that I couldn't control the children, was to lean in and listen to them. And they taught me a lot, and they knew a lot. And I taught all boys ungraded primary. So just honoring them as capable, competent, thoughtful, learners and teachers that we learn from the children. And, and it is, how to humanize and not romanticize. But, and to certain children, certainly death is nothing new. And, I had to switch from saying after the death of George Floyd to after the murder, because that's what it was. It was murder.
It was murder. It was murder.
And, having that language and feeling comfortable with that language, because young children, inner city children of color are familiar with death. They're familiar with police brutality. They'll tell you last night the jump out man came in the car. They know, and their language and learning and listening and multiple ways of representing intelligence and knowledge. And that's what is the richness of the work that you've done with the children. So mine is more just, right on and celebrating that, and those are not comfortable conversations for adults either.
No. Thank you for that, Maurice. It was a very emotional project. Very much so.
Julie, did you want to respond as well?
Well, first, I just want to say powerful, just like I'm so thankful to bear witness to my brilliant colleagues here and hearing about their practice. And I want to pick up on a couple of themes that you shared. So Rukia, you talked about power, agency, and voice. And then Maurice, when you're talking about what to me is the image of the child, right? And we do so much work around anti-racism in the university and in professional learning contexts to create a space to recognize the limiting and harmful images of children that have been rooted in our traditional canons, our theories, right? And our sort of perspectives of child development and developmental psychology. And so just recognizing that we have a long history, and Takiema, you talk about this all the time beautifully, of seeing young children as too innocent, too unaware of race, of gender, of hard things, right? When they're seeing it all around us and reproducing it. And sometimes it's the adults who are too uncomfortable to lean in and see what they see. And that's often it's made more so because of what we teach them in our early childhood and child development courses about how children develop and where they are, ages and stages and all that stuff. So I just want to say that to build on and complement this kind of beautiful, powerful, humanizing work, we need to do work in lots of learning spaces to say, let's deconstruct, let's destabilize what we've learned from Piaget all the way down, all the white male, theories, and say, let's read Eve Tuck and Yang's, decolonization is not a metaphor. Let's look at We Be Loving Black Children. Let's look at why we must talk about race and racism, the brilliance of Black boys, unsettling colonial spaces. And let's deeply lean in and say, what are the images of the child in these texts? What are the images of the family and the community? Let's lift up your stories, your lived experiences to say, what are the images of the child there? And let's hold this up against what we have in our canons and use that to destabilize and say, it's been limiting for far too long. We need to expand. We need to unlearn and relearn what it is to see a child in all of their humanity and respect that, to love them, to love the child. Yeah.
Wow, there's so much here. And honestly, I can't even think about where to go, but I just want to say that this idea of really seeing the full humanity of children, Black and brown children in particular, is there's a racialized component to the inability to do that. And when we are socialized as adults, right, children into adults, into a country and a society that is deeply white supremacist and deeply anti-Black, we actually don't recognize that we are not seeing the full humanity, in particular of Black and brown children when it comes to race. So we have a lot of work to do, because we often think, well, I'm a person of color, I'm a Black woman, like I can't participate in anti-Black racism and white supremacy. Guess what? I do. And it wasn't until I started examining it in myself where I was like, my God, I am also a socializing factor. So you know what? I have got to recognize the ways that I do that and how to stop doing that. And that's some of the work that I do with folks in early childhood, to say we are always socializing children, Maurice, both by the things we do and also the things we are silent about, the invisibility, the lack thereof, right? And so once we start to recognize that we are these socializers, we're one of the primary socializing factors for children. Once we realize that, then we're like, well, what exactly are we socializing you into? And so, Rukia, what you have showed us is that it is possible to help socialize young children into racial identities that are aware, that have an adult that can create a framework and help them begin to make sense of things that they see, that they feel, that they observe, and are so flipping confusing and scary. When nobody's talking to them about this, what they're going to do is just kind of say, well, what are the messages that I'm going to get? Don't talk about it. It's scary. For many kids of color, it's, well, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with that person that they got that happening to? You understand what I'm saying? So we have so much power, and you have taken back that power and put it together in community with children and with families to say, what are we going to do here? Right? We always have knowledge as adults. This idea that progressive and play-based education means you don't introduce content to children is ridiculous. Of course we do that. What were you going to say?
No, you're right. I was sharing with someone, I will forever remember George Floyd crying out for his mother. And for me, that will never go away. That cannot be unheard. And that's what I hold for me as I keep moving forward in this work, that this is the path that we've chosen. This is the power we hold.
And children cry out for their mothers every day in different ways. And children of color, that the thing is, the Ghanaian concept of sankufa is the idea of looking back to look forward. Right. And if we think about the role of Black children in this country, and I will go to the book that Denisha mentioned, child care justice, because historically, for Black enslaved children, it was a life of desperation and degradation. And our vision of the child finds its roots in the historical enslavement of Africans, and that children were pressed into service as early as 7 years of age. And, this is, yes, and so when you think about that, what was, that education was the province of the privileged and white privileged males. And what we have come to, and I think in our prep for this, Denisha held up a book, and it's called Segregation by Experience. And while, Rukia, your kids are getting these rich, robust, but most children are not getting that. And children of color, and Black children in particular, are getting what Bob Moses called a sharecropper education. And it ain't fit for nothing. And, so when we look at the historical roots of the education of children of color, and the work, one of the chapters in the book is called The Pedagogy of Poverty. And what we give to children of color is of no use in our attitudes, in the microaggression and the expulsion rate of 3 and 4 year olds from pre-K, 3 times the rate of K-12. I mean, we have a serious problem. And I often, when the books that you were talking about, Julie, and I thought about Jawanza Kunjufu's The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. I mean, he was telling us a long time ago that we need to wake up. So, I mean, just makes me think about that historical context of, if we want to center racial justice in early childhood, zip codes and surnames and all of that comes into play.
So powerful. And I think we are definitely going to have to put together a document with all the books, since we have a lot of resources that people need to get out. And Jawanza Kunjufu wrote that book in the early 90s, late 80s, and he changed the name. I think it's another, because I don't know, the name might have been hard for people, but Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys was what it was called. But the content so powerful. And Maurice, just to be clear, I have looked at how Black children were treated during enslavement, and I have read that they were put to work at 3. As early as 2 or 3 years old, right? Because remember—
Oh, I don't doubt that. Whatever, if you could pour water, if you could scoop water in the field, I mean, yes.
Yes, and picking cotton in the fields, right? So we think about what the fine motor experiences of our 2 and 3 year olds, and understanding that they had to stand in a hot field next to their parents for how many hours and picking cotton. Like, this is the history. And then when we think about schools, someone in the chat actually wrote about education for Black and Brown children and mentioned this perverse focus on testing and being workers, being groomed, right, to do that kind of work because they are supposedly behind, as opposed to white children in general get access to, can have access, not always because of the intersections of class and language, et cetera, but can more often have the opportunity to have access to the progressive, the play-based, the like, who are you as a whole person, the art, et cetera, as opposed to the regimented experiences.
Well, if you can pick cotton at 3, you have fine motor skills. I mean, that because it's thorny and prickly, so it's not just the standing. But certainly you would be pressed into service. I don't know how. Cotton is about production, about quantity. So I don't know how much cotton a 3-year-old can pick, but even being out there in the field with your parent tied to their back or whatever, pouring water. I mean, it's just been a challenge. And what I am saying is that we are, whether it's picking cotton or using that as a metaphor of the struggle for young children, early childhood from birth to age 8, it is to get second-class instruction is picking cotton, to have inadequate, not to have agency and voice and funds of knowledge recognized as picking cotton. So I will use, for the purposes of this conversation, cotton as a metaphor, picking cotton as a metaphor for all of the injustices that
our schools weren't designed for us. To your point, our schools weren't designed for us. They were based on capitalistic, one-size-fits-all workers.
And they still aren't.
You know what? That's the whole. we could, like I said, we could be here all night because that's the whole education system. But that's not what we're doing today. But y'all can start looking at that history. We might have a part 2, part 3, part 5. But for real, it is a lot, and the time is now or never for us to recognize that and choose not to participate in it, okay? Mm-hmm. And I also just want to point out that Denisha should put her work into the chat, because this work that Denisha is doing on play, true play, play and equity, y'all need to know about that as well, for real. So Julie, we've been kind of starting to mention a little bit about some statistics and some trends and things that are like happening, like why we even need this conversation. Do you want to share a little bit about kind of what we're looking at? Why do we even need to center?
Happy to do that, but if it's okay, I'd like to build off of something we just said, because it's just bubbling up. I want to go with it. And so that is this idea that, along with everything that my brilliant colleagues just said, that we have to have an honest conversation about research, evaluation, continuous improvement, and the way we have a religion around numbers and metrics without questioning what is beneath those numbers, right? Because they lead to cycles of oppression through telling deficit stories. How many of you have seen, and holding up to what Maurice just said, headlines in the newspaper, half of Florida is not ready for kindergarten. Oakland's children are, right? This is weaponized and used to reinforce a narrative that says children need a different pedagogy, right? And we have to have the courage to call that out and say enough. How were those tools defined? How were they, validated? And how was the reliability checked? We're the people who the tools are recognizing and representing. Were they there to shape the content of the tools, to decide what's important to them, to show the excellence is there? Are we capturing it? Absolutely not, right? So are they there to help us design the tools, to know how to use, to capture data, to communicate data? And I just want to give one example of why this is so important. I mean, when we use numbers and data to position individuals, communities, through deficit and have these cycles of oppression continue, right? We're taking power away from people. We're taking the voice and agency away. And I'm thinking of a student. I have so many amazing students and their work that they've done, but I'm going to share one story. Marlene Fuentes, and her mother ran a family child care home. She probably still does in San Diego, California. And Marlene grew up here in, helping her mom and supporting her mom. And the QRIS came in and kept coming in with these ratings and telling her that this beautifully, culturally, linguistically, not just responsive, but sustaining practice in her family childcare home was not high quality. And her mother kept getting these negative deficit ratings but they never asked her how she defined quality, how her families defined quality, who chose her program. And Marlene we need to use more research methods, evaluation methods that center voice from the bottom up. She used photo voice, gave these Latina family child care providers cameras and said, take pictures of the quality in your centers, in your homes, and then narrate with your voice, not an outside expert, but your voice. Tell me about why you took that picture. How does that represent quality to you, the children, the families you serve? And they said so many beautiful things about respect, about the time that they give, about happiness for the children and the families. These are not on our tools. And so I just want to hold that up as these cycles, when we do not include people in the tools that define quality and the tools that do the research, we can perpetuate these deficit cycles.
So powerful. Julie, when you first started talking, there were like hearts and explosions, positive explosions with the emojis, because it's true. And I think you really bring to light this idea that we can't like fix it in the classroom or fix it on the playground. Like we have to actually fix it everywhere, right? Because
Everywhere.
the root and the foundation is how teachers are being trained. And there's not a class that's centering racial justice in early childhood ed that I know of. If there is one, please share it so we could know where it is. But right, this is mostly in service people who are trying to figure it out for themselves. There's not a policy about this across the field or the country. Looks like Pacific Oaks is doing it. Thank you. California is always out there leading. Thank you so much, Janet. But yeah, we all have to do it. And so thank you to folks that are putting resources in the chat and books, because we're going to grab them all and share. And let's also remember that we don't just need a class, right? We need like it has to be infused into everything, right? Because we do the class on diversity or racial justice, and then everything else is assessment and, student teaching. And you're like, well, what about the racial justice there, right? It's everywhere. So thank you so much.
Julie's point, listen, I'm saying we don't have to do this as a subversive activity. We need to dismantle these systems, these racist systems of assessment and control, and everyone knows QRIS is racist. And we know that all assessments are biased. And so instead of tinkering with them, we need, as activists, we need to dismantle, refuse to participate. Because, we are lured into the incentives of a racist system and a capitalist system. And so you get more money if you're a star or a 5 or a 4. I don't even know what the hell it's all about. But I'm telling you, it works against the justice of children, of young children. And teachers get consumed in trying to meet the standard and lose sight of voice, agency, funds of knowledge, joyful learning, play-based learning, I say dismantle those systems of assessment. And it's interesting as people of color, because we say white people are always changing the rules. Now, if you look at institutions of higher education, many of them are doing away with the SAT and all those standardized assessments. However, we're still holding people accountable. There are private schools that don't engage in that, and their kids do just fine. So to me, it's just another form of oppression. Dismantle it. Don't participate.
I couldn't agree with you more, Maurice. Mm-hmm. From my own experience, we can't say we want to dismantle white supremacy, but we're still holding up systems that are ingrained. What are we getting children ready for?
Right.
What is the test what are we assessing them for? It's all steeped in that. So just my experience in terms of hiring folks, I've just found that there's so much more work that needs to go. We need to reimagine something different than perhaps we've ever seen before. Mm-hmm. And we have this hierarchy, whether it's, teacher education or, the way we pay folks who work with very young children to those who work with adults. Let's dismantle the whole system.
And call it what it is, racist.
Yeah, basically.
Well, all right, everybody in the chat, let us know if that's the thing you're going to do. You're going to dismantle it, come September. So this is the part where I'm going to bring up some other thoughts, because I have really thought a lot about dismantling, right? Dismantling, eradicating, stronger language, etc. And then I sort of go, I believe in that. And then I want to know what's going to happen tomorrow when children show up in programs. So here's the thing. We need y'all who are saying dismantle it. We need y'all who are sitting on this chat saying, I don't think I'm there yet because I'm going to be teaching tomorrow. And so I'm going to do what I can. We have to have parents sitting here, because you can't dismantle if parents bring their kids in every day saying, well, can I get some worksheets from my 3-year-old? How are you going to do
Yes, you
that?
can.
You can, but they're
Yeah.
going to go find the people that give them, right? So this has to be a coordinated movement that we all, right? Not necessarily you wait for it, but I'm just saying we can't just talk to each other, right? And so we got to talk to the policymakers, the research, the teacher. Everybody has to be a part of this conversation. Otherwise, we'll get what we always have, the silos where some people are ready to push on and everyone else is like, no, we actually want to hold on tighter, because that's what happens when you start to dismantle systems, as we may have some examples of that in our world right now, right? So this is interesting for us to think about, what roles do we play in this social change ecosystem? And that's not my word. Those are Deepa Iyer. And I will put the link in the chat to Deepa Iyer. I found that really fascinating to think about. Over the pandemic, she was doing some workshops on it. She has a website, and it's like, here's your social change ecosystem. We need lots of roles to move an ecosystem forward. And so where is the role that you naturally align to or is in your zone of genius, right? And then also, what is the role that you're in? Because you might be the storyteller or the connector, but you might actually be in the role of someone that's just pushing the whole thing forward, and that's not the best role. So it's something to kind of think about. But there's a lot of things coming into the chat. This is amazing. Maurice, did you get a chance to share what your what it looks like to center racial justice beyond dismantling it all?
I want to say that, just in response to what you said as a provocation, that it is complex. But we don't have to give out worksheets. Now I just want to be clear about that. I was over a lab school that was Reggio inspired, and the parents wanted, and I said, we just don't do that. They wanted to celebrate Halloween. We don't do it. So we have to speak our truth and act upon our truth as individuals. And then if we want systems change, those of us who study systems thinking say, in order to change a system, you have to study the system that you want to change. So we can't just react emotionally. Those things are in place and they are systemic, and they are, so how do we dismantle a system of oppression? And we start in the classroom, and we start by talking to children about real, meaningful, hands-on, minds-on things that are important to kids. They don't want to learn the color red. I mean, what the hell? They don't need to come to school to learn the color red. So children want to do interesting things that engage their minds. So, I mean, centering racial justice is giving children the tools, the dispositions, the knowledge and skills to maneuver through their early childhood and their adolescence and their young adulthood. That's laying the foundation. And in the book, we talk about this pedagogy of privilege. And the thing is that where you are born, where you live, pretty much determines what you get exposed to. The people you meet, the schools you go to, the conversations you hear. So one way to center racial justice is to look at equity of experiences, the quality of relationships that kids have with adults, the quality relationships kids have with one another, the experiences they have. Those kids who had the portrait of the under the rainbow, I mean, only young children would do that hand in hand. They did beyond, they're dead, but those kids, our children have just this wonderful way of seeing the world. And so, I mean, one way about centering racial justice is to be real with kids, to be authentic with children, and not only with children, with their parents also, and with their grandparents, if they come to the school, also having real purposeful conversations, honoring the funds of knowledge that exist in their communities, in their homes, and building on that. I mean, we could have a movement. The policymakers are, they're just talking smack, but they're just talking smack. But if every teacher who believes it was a progressive, a social justice, racial justice advocate and activist acted upon their beliefs, we can change this stuff. We can change it.
Amazing, amazing. So thank you so much, everyone. That was such a lively, passionate, really important conversation. So I want to invite the audience into the chat. What's your vision of centering racial justice in early childhood? What are you thinking? I see you're responding to us, but it's also important to know what you're working towards and not just what you're working against. So what's your vision of centering racial justice in early childhood? What do we need to all be thinking about? Let us all be in community right now. So I'm gonna take just a moment, and as you're doing that, I'm gonna call out a couple things I see in the chat. What is high quality? Who defines it? Right? I love the idea of asking families and staff to identify something that represents quality on our program. Imagine that. You know how we always talk about the family, or we say the parents, which is not just the parents, are the child's first teacher. And then they get to school and we're like, well, we're going to tell you what your kid's doing and learning. And then we're going to ask you to bring this thing here. And then we're going to say, you show up. So it's really great parent engagement. Y'all, come on now. It's 2022. We're going to have to get it together, right? Awesome. Right. So people are starting to add their things in here. Again, the QRIS was serious. There was a lot of comments about that. QIRS and assessments are about the money to justify grant giving. It's not actually about children and learning. Well, thank you so much, so much. Lots of comments. So yeah, it just takes a few months to dismantle some systems. Yeah, that actually reminds me of what you said. That was an ironic comment that someone, I'm sure, put in the chat. Like, Rukia, when you mentioned that it takes your curriculum took a year, right? Like how long?
The project itself took a year.
It took a year. That is actually one of the things that I wrote down, because do y'all remember what happened in 2020 when we had in this country the great racial / reawakening, where it was an awakening for some and a reawakening and a deepening for others? And that's across all racial identities, I would say, one or the other. Do you remember what happened? How everyone was like, oh my God, there's anti-Black racism. We have to deal with it right now. We're going to buy all the books that were ever written and we're going to go to all the, right? And then like many of us were sitting back like, ooh, y'all gonna get tired very fast. Like, let's see what happens come October. And then, oh, womp womp, here we are 2 years later. And guess what? Right. And so that urgency that everyone gets when we have these moments of recognition and realization, that doesn't work for anyone. It really doesn't work for children. And so when we say this took a long time to get here, we know that we wanted to change tomorrow because it's literally harming people and communities. But also, what is developmentally appropriate for children? How do we listen to them and follow their leads? Everything that we do in how we would define the highest quality of progressive, play-based, open-ended, child-centered, and culturally responsive education for any topic is going to need to happen when it comes to talking about race and racism and racial justice. And so let's take our time. Let's be thoughtful, right? Let's not perseverate and not move forward, but let's take a little time. And I really appreciate that you shared that. So we have some comments. People are talking about centering racial justice. We hear physical and emotional safety for all, that it's welcoming and honest, that we're moving the norm away from white, cis, able-bodied representation. And we're really saying like, there's some biased materials and experience and curriculum and assessment. And with children, we can ask questions, right? We can say, what's happening here, right? Who is here? Who's not here? How is this written, right? Did we talk about stereotypes? Is this an example? So lots of things. Holding oppressors accountable for their racist and discriminatory actions and working to dismantle, right? They do require the participation. And so if people don't participate, there you go. Yes, being proactive rather than reactive. Workforce conversation. Hi, Lacey. Respect for the people who care for and educate children, right? Oh my goodness, that is a whole thing. This country has done some interesting things to children in general. And so our systems, our early childhood systems struggle. So thank you for adding all of these things. Hey, Beverly. Okay, awesome. So here's what I wanted. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Can I add one thing real quick?
Absolutely. Go
we
for
have
it.
not, I don't think we've talked about it enough. I heard it mentioned in the chat once, but that is the word money, finance. You know, I want to just share that I decided to stop complaining about the fact that folks in early childhood are so often, we don't have access to learning deeply about finance, about financial literacy, about how our systems and structures are forecasted and resourced or not resourced, right? We're not invited to the table. You can have deep knowledge. You can be in this field for 20, 30 years. And if you don't have accounting knowledge, if you don't have, a simple finance, you are not brought to the table. And huge decisions are made that impact every one of us without somebody helping them to make important decisions about how money is spent, how it's allocated, what the consequences are about shifting funds here and there, right? And saying what you said, we are brain builders, it is so important to put money into these first 5 years. And this is this is part of the racial wealth gap and the gap in our field. It is a field with many, right, people of color. And I know at my institution, I fought for so long. I said, we are doing a leadership program in early childhood. Our folks need to have access to these business classes because they're going to hit a ceiling. And then we're just going to be responding to those systems, but not building them in the same way. So I just want to point that out. It's what I just said, stop complaining about it, go back. That's why I went back to school and I'm a full-time student in an MBA trying to bring anti-racism, focusing on finance and data analytics. But we need to sort of think about that, right? Where that gap is and why it's there and how we can push past that to say not okay.
Thank you so much, Julie. Wonderful. Rukia or Maurice, did you want to share anything that you saw in the chat or that Julie mentioned?
I thought what resonated with me was the question asked by Carol about what is quality. And I think that's something really powerful for us to uphold. I don't think we center enough, for example, teachers and children as researchers. In terms of, with families, we're looking for this hierarchy to inform us, as opposed to thinking, as Sonia Shop talked about, the ways in which theory informs practice and practice informs theory. So again, we know that systems won't be changed immediately, but we have the power to start to make shifts and questions what we've been taught and what assumptions we made, that somehow research comes from this place, as opposed for it coming from within and outward. And I think that's really powerful in terms of looking at the quality of the relationships between the adults and the children and all the people who are living in a space together. And what does it mean in terms of racial identity? What does it mean to be known full well in a community? To truly be known for your Blackness?
Ooh, that last question you just added just makes me think about the fact that we sometimes jump to talk about the racial justice before we've actually spoken about the race, right? There is a book that I wanted to share. It's called Our Skin, and it's a first conversation about race. Lots of hearts in the chat. One of the authors, Megan, may be on this Zoom or webinar. Megan Madison, Jessica Rowley, and Isabel Rojas. This book, I know, Rukia, you have some experience with it, but what I would like to do is share, well, I'll give you a little teaser. So here's the beginning where we talk about race, right? We all have skin, it comes in different colors. And then there proceeds to be a really great conversation explaining race and explaining melanin and the names that we use for race, right? Then we get to the page where I dare say every time I've read this, particularly to predominantly white communities, this is the uncomfortable page. A long time ago, way before you were born, a group of white people made up an idea called race. They sorted people by skin color and said that white people were better, smarter, prettier, and that they deserve more than everybody else. That isn't true or fair at all, but it's a story that has been told for a long time. Remember what we talked about in the beginning? So we going in, y'all, because if we don't talk about it, we can't dismantle it. The authors did not make that fact up. That's actually what happened. And we can go and read their words that they said those things. So Rukia, what was it like to read this book with your children?
So it was extremely powerful. Ironically, we had a child who was able to read, happened to be a little Black girl. So on that photograph, you said she was actually reading it to the other children who happened to be predominantly white. It was powerful because, again, it gave us the tool to have a conversation, much needed conversation, where we were recognizing, again, our Black and brown children had more language. They were having more discussions at home about race. And for our white children, they weren't having those conversations. So it was kind of a springboard to have those conversations. And also for our children, starting to talk about conversations of like, what does it mean in terms of power to be an ally? Because if this is what has been said, what do I need to do, you know, as a young white child? And that's the conversations that it went into. So very powerful book, very meaningful in every single classroom. Love that it's a board book. I'm just gonna throw that in. But yeah, really beautiful, and often giving it to our families. We had a library, so we let our families take it home too, so they could continue to have the conversations, which was often difficult for them to have and carry on at home. And so because it was an author, another person's words, it became maybe a little easier for you to read what someone else said, even though, you know, it's part of the culture.
Well, you asked earlier, you know, I've had to do self-talk throughout this webinar to calm myself down, because this is, you know, so I was just being silent for a moment, but I can't any longer, because the thing is, you know, and I know that book, and I know Megan well, and so that, you know, it's powerful. But I'm also sitting here thinking, what about even when we have these discussions? Because, you know, I have the children to be successful, need to have a sense of space, place, and grace. And after we have the conversation, is there a space for me? Because what we communicate to children are on multiple levels. I mean, it's multi-sensory. And, you know, children want to know, is there a place for me? Where do I fit in? And, you know, is there a space for me, which is beyond place? You're on my roster, but where do I fit into the schema in this environment? And then the last one is there grace? Will people forgive me? Will people accept me? What I did yesterday, because kids get scapegoated all the time. And you could have a wonderful conversation about race and treat a child like they are the worst thing. Kids know, if I go in any classroom and I say, who's the most mischievous? Because I was taught that you're not supposed to say children are bad. And I told someone, you never taught if you don't think that they're any bad. So who's the most mischievous child in the classroom? Every child knows. If I ask them, who does the teacher like the best? And they know it. So if place, space, and grace, in addition to the difficult conversations, have to be present for children to thrive. And if we're going to center racial justice, we have to. And so we talk about teacher preparation, and someone quoted Asa Hilliard in a webinar not too long ago. And Asa, according to the person who quoted him, said that teachers have to love children. Of course, there is a philosopher, Tina Turner, who says, what's love got to do with it? But that aside, the reality, this person who was on the webinar said, we have to ask people, do they love themselves?
Right.
Because you can't give that which you do not have.
Right.
You know, and so, and I mean, I don't mean to be narcissistic, but you have to be centered to do this work. You have to be centered to center racial justice. And so, I mean, those are just the thoughts. Of course, I'm going to self-talk and calm down again. So I'll be silent for a while. I'm muting myself.
No, this is so good. Don't keep calm, and we gotta not keep calm and center racial justice. No, I think you just bring up some really amazing points, because there can be harm done when people try to have these conversations and to try to center racial justice and try to do things around racism with young children, and they haven't done the work themselves, that they don't understand it, that they haven't explored their own racial identities, their internalization of it. Like, you have to do this work on both levels in order to do it well, respectfully, and carefully with young children. And that is incredibly, incredibly important. What I love about the end of the book is that it really does end on a note of justice, right? Like, we are all working together. We all have to do our part, right? And that's how we make things better. And that's what adults, where they landed, right? In 2020, it was like, what are we going to do? We're going to give money to Black-led organizations. We're going to protest. We're going to read books. We're going to reach out to people and understand, in some cases, apologize for past behavior and thoughts. And we can do that no matter our race, right? And just thinking about the power of that process, and the power of growth, the power of receiving feedback, right? The idea is not to all get along, not in an early childhood classroom and not in life. It's the feedback, and how do we get strong to take that feedback, to understand people's boundaries, and to respond accordingly, and to always be on a continuous growth path. And that's for racial justice, and that's for everything. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, because we don't need people who perhaps like have a colorblind perspective trying to read this, and we're like, wait, actually, that's not it, right?
I was going to add to what Maurice is saying about the layers of it, right? So when our children read that book, those were the same group of children who were working on the mural for Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. Those children had been together since the infant room. Their teacher looped with them, so there was continuity of care. The teacher had participated in years of professional development addressing internalized white supremacy. So it's not to suggest just reading the book is enough. There's layers, and it's complex, beautiful work. So yes, it's all of it. It's all of it.
Maurice, in the chat, someone's like, don't stop talking.
Yeah.
You're dropping gems. I told y'all when we started, this is how our planning meetings went. And there's just a lot here. So as we start to wind down, we're going to wind down a little bit and get to the Q&A. But I wanted to ask you all each to share one challenge and one joy in your work to center racial justice in early childhood. Who wants to go first?
Oh, I don't. A challenge. It's all a challenge. But there have been some, because we're winding down, I just want to reinforce in something I'm seeing in the chat as well. And so what to do, because that's really, and so I'm thinking about Gloria Ladson-Billings' culturally relevant pedagogy. And then, thinking about abolitionist pedagogy, which was mentioned, which I know you all embrace in your school, in terms of that work. And then this social capital pedagogy, which is something that we don't talk a lot about. So I just want to sort of sign off, because teacher as researcher, we are always learning. And part of we can't do if we're not learning. And so I'm just encouraging participants to explore culturally relevant pedagogy, to explore abolitionist pedagogy, and to explore social capital pedagogy as frameworks, as conceptual frameworks that will help them centering racial justice in early childhood. It's all a challenge. The work is a struggle. You know what I'm talking about? It's a struggle to try and in our country, we've experienced a cultural tsunami. It is more racist and more sexist and more capitalist than it's ever been before. And we're pushing against that tide and children clearly are not important. And we were important during the height of the pandemic, and now we're no longer important. You know, it's what you said, all these people of goodwill were going to do something during the Great Awakening. Now it's crickets. It's crickets. It really is.
Okay, so you left us on the challenges. I get it. That's real talk. Real talk. So Julie, how about if you have a challenge and a joy, would you please?
Sure. Yeah, I think, you know, folks who know my work know that a lot of what I do is working around understanding the neurobiology of stress and trauma and how to support individuals, groups, programs to understand the pathways to regulation. So if we're activated into a stress response and we don't have our cortex available or much less available, we're going to be way more likely to do harm, way less likely to be able to align to mission, right? And to have a negative impact, even if our intentions are good. And I think about how important it is, therefore, given that, to, if we want people to do the things we've been talking about today, and I really want to just lean in and say, white folks, you have to do the work even more. You have to wake up every day. You have to recognize that when you were born, the world, you know, you have a sense of belonging, that there's, you don't have that psychic burden of race, of wondering how people are going to feel about and respond to your race, right? There's a sense that's not even spoken, but just that you are the norm for humanity, right? We don't talk about she's a white teacher very much, right? There's just this sense, and we have to dismantle that, but we have to see it first. And it's hard and painful and daily and you know, lifetime work. In order to lean in and do something hard like that, to reflect, to self-regulate, to be willing to hear another perspective, to be humble, repair when you've messed up. And, you know, we're going to mess up a lot, to take responsibility and accountability for that. We have to be out, not in a place of our survival brain, right? Not in that fight, flight, freeze, but we have to be in a place where we're open, the cortex is open to learning. And the more stressed you are, the less able you are to do that work. And stress is contagious. So when we think about what we've been around, we're walking into our work with already, all of us, a level of so much stress that just keeps getting worse and worse. So we're activated on that arousal continuum at a level where our cortex is really often not available, right? So it's, for me, it's the challenge is recognizing that just where we are as individuals, as programs, schools, family childcare homes, as communities, as a nation, as a world, we are often in a place of threat, and that is not where we can be to do this work. And so I would say the opportunity in that is to learn how to have that self-awareness, the body awareness, and to learn the pathways to regulation. Because just as stress is contagious, so is calmness. And we can co-regulate, we can guide people back to regulation, help people do more mission-centered work if we can help them get out of that sense of fight, flight, freeze, right? So that's just something I think a lot about, is wanting to guide people into courage, into the hard place, but thinking about state-dependent functioning, which is what I just described. The joy, I just want to say, is trying every day, and again, sort of messing up and never meeting that North Star, but just striving every day to be a better person than I was the day before. One of the things I try to do is decenter myself and my work, and to commit every day to it's there, shining a light on the excellence, the brilliance of my students, my colleagues of color, the children, the folks that I work with. And that has been such an incredible joy, is just leaning into that over the last several years more and more. Whether it's through stories, they're co-presenters, we're working on interviewing folks for our books together, whatever it is, that has been an incredible joy, just to be able to celebrate every day that brilliance.
Thank you so much, Julie. So important, your message as a white woman and for white people to recognize that those who benefit from the systems of oppression have to bear the major burden of dismantling them. And that's so, so powerful and so important. And also your book, Culturally Responsive Self-Care for Early Childhood Educators, was a powerful book. I love it. So that's where people can read a lot of what you just spoke about in detail. So we'll put that book in the chat as well. Thank you, thank you. All right, Rukia, a challenge and a joy.
The challenges and the joy. So I want to just, again, also thank you, Julie, for what you offered. That has been one of the challenges in this work. I feel an overwhelming support from my family, but there are lots of moments of white fragility, which can be extremely stressful. In our program, and the times that we have had opposition, it has almost 100% always been families that were white and parents of young white girls that wanted to protect their innocence. And I think we worked through and navigated that. And I learned to be really clear and articulate and to support my teachers and us in this work. But I think that that is something that white folks need to uphold, that this work is beautiful and challenging. It needs to be done, but it can't be done with centering white children and white folks. So I appreciate that statement. That has definitely been one of the challenges. I think for us, an even more profound challenge has also been a source of joy for us, though. We came and opened August 19th, 2013. I like to say the Highlander School is a Leo, and we really weren't quite sure of everything that we were doing. And all of my staff that I work with, my colleagues, are Black and brown women. And so one of the things that we had to address in terms of engaging and centering racial injustice was internalized white supremacy. And that work, that self-work, that care is very powerful, very necessary. How do you go on that work every single day? Again, from a place of self-love. It's not narcissistic. You can't give what you don't have. How do you help another child feel good about themselves and who they are and their Blackness when you internalize concepts about yourself? So that has been a painful work, but it's also been a source of joy for us because we've rethought and challenged what we've always been taught. Oh, toddlers can't share. Who says that? Who wrote that book? Piaget? Who was that? Who is this person? This is what I know about young children. So in that place of healing and love and being earth-centered, we found our joy in claiming our own African values, our own indigenous values, reclaiming who we are. Like, yeah, why aren't we closing down for Juneteenth Day? Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we bringing in ourselves? Oh no, girl, you don't have to code switch. You know, all these things have been powerful and beautiful. Some challenges, but really joyful in that we are recognizing this is the agency we have, this is the power we have, and really the relationships amongst the staff. How do you build a community where, again, you're talking about centering racial justice, but you can't also have an organization that's rooted in just hierarchy and capitalism because those intersect. So you got to rethink, what does it mean to quote unquote manage people? You don't, you're in relationship with. What does it mean to inspire and love people? Because I'm also don't want to oppress these Black and brown women. So again, those have been challenges, but also our greatest joys.
Boy, y'all have said a word, like so much, lots of comments in the chat, thanking everyone and lots of reactions. Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'll just say quickly in my work, a challenge that I keep noticing is the lack of resources to support in-service educators to do the work that you all are engaging in right now, like sitting on this panel. It just, the money isn't there, or they choose to not put the money into it when the educators, the leaders, the parents even the children are like, hey, you know? And so when I think about those statistics that, for example, Black children are 3.6 times as likely to be suspended from preschool than white children. And I know that that is a primary contributor for the preschool to prison pipeline. I feel this agency, I'm like, what do you mean you can't afford to do professional development and to have coaching and to work on not doing that? Because nobody realizes that we're doing it until you take a step outside and you say, wait, these discipline practices, this lack of culturally responsive books, this art, right? When children don't see themselves, it has an impact. And so I'm like, when are we going to say that it's important? By showing that it's important and making sure that we create environments that are truly equitable and healthy and responsive, both racially and culturally, for all children. So that feels really challenging to me. I have two joys that I want to share. One, the work that I did with organizations this past year was happening at the height of the quote anti-CRT, whatever movement. We know that's nobody's doing CRT in early childhood or K to 12, but it was happening. So while the news and everything was going on and on, I would get onto Zoom and we did the work. And people were like, this is what we're doing differently. This is how we're changing our policies. This is how we're showing up. Like, it was so inspiring. I was like, I don't care what's happening out there. This is what's within my locus of control. And I am making a difference. And that is what I'm focusing on. I am not going to be distracted. So that gave me a lot of joy. The other thing that gives me joy is that these people, these millennials and Gen Z, are out there doing exactly what you said, Maurice. They're like, dismantle it. We got a whole nother vision. I got a pedagogy called Woke Kindergarten. I'm going to write not just one book, Our Skin, but Megan and her co-authors wrote a book about consent. Hello. I know some people in the highest court of the land that need to know more about that, right? But they didn't get it in preschool. You see what I'm saying, right? Consent, I'm sorry, I don't remember all the books, but this is amazing. So we're like, it doesn't exist. I'm not waiting for anybody else to do it. I'm going to build the solutions now. And I am an early childhood educator, a parent, an expert, et cetera, et cetera. I have the resources to do this myself. I have a friend who built a forest school in her backyard in Metro Atlanta called the Liberatorium. Okay. She is like, incredible. There are so many people doing amazing things. And so noticing that, being connected on social media and in person, and recognizing that we are not working in isolation gives me so much joy and hope for what we are building. So I just want to share that. This is about the connection, right? And sharing our work. So we're going to just do one thing before we get to the Q&A, and we're going to put a link in the chat, which is for a Mentimeter. And we're going to ask you to send one word that we'll look at together as a word cloud. And the question is, what would happen if racial justice, if it was centered, what would it look like or feel like, right? So you can send one word, and then I think you should be able to send another word. And in a moment or two, we will be able to see what our word cloud looks like, and then we'll go to the Q&A. I see some people are leaving. Thank you so much for your comments and for being here. I felt your energy. Y'all felt the energy, panelists?
Yes.
Awesome. Wonderful. So again, the link in here, if you can't put the link into the Mentimeter, then you can put it right here into the chat too. We'll just be able to see. So what would it look and feel like if racial justice was centered in early childhood? That's the question that we're asking. So we'll take a moment, we'll breathe, we'll stretch. Come on, we're early childhood people. Come on, lock your hands, stretch them up, twist your wrists. You know, we've been sitting for a long time. I see you, Julie. I see you. Come on.
Next, you're going to ask us to sing.
Actually, this might be better for you because you're around children all the time. Come on, Rukia, give us a little 30-second.
Wait, it always skips though when you're on Zoom when you try to sing.
You can lead us. We're muted. Go for it.
Oh my goodness. Friends, 1, 2, 3. All my friends are here with me. Here we go. You're my friend.
You're my friend. You're my friend. You're my friend.
Friend, what? Friend,
Friend.
what?
1, 2, 3.
All my friends are here with me. Shooby doop dooby doo scat scat scat.
Yay!
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. We love us, don't we? The
Only
early childhood
community could
folks.
you sing a song and not be self-conscious.
Not amongst family, early
No.
childhood folks. You know how we do. Thank you so much. So Denisha, do you think we'll be able to see what the Mentimeter looks like? You're getting a lot of play in the chat. That was awesome.
I love the song theme of togetherness. Yeah, community, stronger together. Beautiful.
Beautiful. Look at our word cloud, everyone. Beautiful. And you know that the bigger the words, that means multiple people sent those words. And so we have equity at the center. Equity. Everyone has what they need is what equity is, right? Beautiful. Freedom, love, kindness, hopeful, truth, powerful. Oh my goodness. It's so beautiful.
I see joy. We have to always center joy, don't we?
Yes. Joy, peace, grace, breathing, honoring. Beautiful. Thank you so much, everyone. If you want to add a couple more, we'll do a screenshot and add this to the document so you can have this and hold on to it, because our, shiny, happy feelings that we have now in this moment, they're not always going to be there, but that doesn't mean we don't do the work. So we'll look back on this. Right? Wonderful. Thank you so much, Denisha. So I think Denisha's coming on so we can have some Q&A, correct?
Yes. I mean, first, I just want to thank you. This was just amazing. I was doing lots of things with the list and the books. And Julie, I got to go back and listen because you rattled off like 6 books and I got like 2 of them. And everyone's like, what did she say? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to have to go back and listen. But
I think you caught them all.
I caught most of them because I know them. They're on my shelf, either waiting to be read or something to that effect. So thank you so much. All of you have just been all of it. And Maurice, Rukia, everything has just been amazing. So thank you. We do have some questions. I want to start with the first question from Pat because it's slightly different than the others, which I think I can combine. But Pat says, as a play advocate who helps organize play days, close streets to play, and joins other events by adding play activities, what advice do you have for me and others of activities and approaches we can do to help Black and Brown children feel as welcome as white children, right, in these play days? And that's something we're going to be discussing next week. Tomorrow, Nancy and I, about this whole equity around play issue. And so I'd love for you guys to also think about that. So I can, I'll put the question in the chat in case you want to look at it again.
One thing I can say to start, does that sound okay to jump in? Okay. I think I know Pat. We've been at some conferences together. I believe she identifies as white. So my first comment would be, partner with the community, the families that you want to have as part of whatever you're working on, and have a reciprocity of co-creating, co-designing, and you're doing a lot of listening. You're standing back and making sure that you are not bringing a vision in, but being responsive to those children and families, and really creating honest, authentic, real spaces to hear what's valuable. Because you might have an idea, and I'm not saying that this is the case with Pat, but she might have an idea and go in, and that's not what they want, need, or value, right? So just learning to disrupt that.
Well, I also think it's important. I mean, you can level with kids. You can ask kids, what would it take for you to have a good time here? I mean, it's just, what kind of play would you want to do here? And, it's not, it's not, kids are kids and they like to play. So why do the white kids feel more comfortable playing? Because they have more opportunities to play. So, I mean, it's not different play for different children, but the context, and then I go back to space, place, and grace, because that's what helps children feel at ease. And so ask the kids, what do you want to do here? I mean, we never ask the kids what they want to do. How, you know, because Denise, you have seen in China the kind of play that makes me go, what? You know, so I'm just really, it's for me, and I'm not saying this in a put down way, it's just ask the kids what they want to do.
Yeah, I would say the listening, the context, being engaged with the families, having conversations, listening to the children, and listening to the children can be multi-layered. Some children can communicate very well verbally. So as a strategy, you may do videotaping and studying, you know, what is resonating, who is playing where, what are the dynamics of the group. This is part of that research. But again, a research from a place of love. So it could be documenting what's happening and what's unfolding, and giving visibility to it and making meaning of it with the community as well.
Can I add something? Would you guys mind if I, because I've been doing this work, and what I notice is that a lot of times Black and brown children are policed more heavily during their play than other children. So what they might be willing to do, they want to do, it pushes up on your edges. Sometimes it makes you uncomfortable. Maybe it's all children, but it might particularly be those children. The teachers I've been working with this organization called Hatch Partners in Play out of Pittsburgh, I remember the teacher saying, this is making me uncomfortable, but y'all are so excited, so I'm going to walk away. And not because she was like, we ran to get the cameras when this boy tried to do this thing on this play material, because we was like, you can do it, we just want to record it. And she wanted to tell him to stop, and she had to recognize that, right? And so she walked away and let us other adults stay with him, right? So he can do what he was doing, and we got great videos and no one got hurt. So there's that part of recognizing this is making me feel uncomfortable and I'm going to step back. But also, why are we always policing the movements of Black and brown bodies? I wouldn't want to play if every time I moved, you were telling me, don't do that, you're too loud, oh, don't play like that, oh, why do you got to do it like that, right? Sometimes we're really dismissive about the cultural practices children bring to their play, the way they talk to each other. We're trying to micromanage those behaviors too much. And I see it all the time. And instead of and the teachers this year, they've learned to just be comfortable, that is just a form of play. And it's okay that's how they talk and engage. And they've had to really trust the children. And I think that's a big issue as well, too.
And there are also rites of passage. Play in a cultural context is a rite of passage. And you have to understand that. Boys, little Black boys, play rough. And no one wants a roughhouse with them in the classroom. No one wants a roughhouse. So if, I think when people talked earlier about the complexity, but if you step back, if you move away from kids, they invent, they create their own play. Some is dangerous, but they don't get hurt typically. They figure it out. Because part of it's balance and control of body control, it's kinesthetic. And if you are my problem is that I think many teachers have never had childhoods themselves. That's what the problem is. And they are micromanaging the children all the time, not just the tone, how loud they can be, how rough they can be. And so the kids are like, forget about it, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, I think, again, it's really important to listen to the children, create different means to listening to them, each individual child. You heard, for example, Maurice say Black boys like to play rough. You could take that on and you may have a child who's like, okay, you make that assumption, listen to that individual child and move forward in that way.
And sometimes when you intervene, the kids will say, we were just playing.
We were just getting started. Yeah. What are you doing?
Someone put it in there. It's the teachers who are uncomfortable with it. I was teaching kindergarten, these two boys, they were the last ones there. They really wanted to wrestle. And I was like, boys, come on. They're like, come on, Miss Jones, please. I said, okay, look, but when you get hurt, I don't want to hear it. Right. These boys were full on, shirts off, middle of the class. And I'm just standing back. Their dads and uncles weren't there yet. And I'm like, I'm going to get in so much trouble for this. There's going to be tears and blood. And I hate you. You're not my friend. Their dads walk in the room and they was like, okay, we good. Threw on their coats. Bye. Nothing. And then we bonded. They were looking at me like, thank you for trusting us. We are with you now because we had literally just 15 minutes of just flat out wrestling in the middle of the classroom with Max. And I was there watching and I was like, girls couldn't do that. I'm gonna tell you right now, girls would be like, you're not my friend. I keep you hurt me in my face like that. I'm not talking to you ever again. But boys, they were totally fine, And so, but I was uncomfortable, but they reassured me that is what they needed, that they just needed that space to do that.
Okay, I'm gonna step in because I think that we're upholding the gender binary. And I want to point out that girls and boys are not the only gender identities in early childhood. And so I just think it's important that we always remember that. And we were not socialized to think that way. So this is a learning edge for all of us, right? To make sure that we are not gonna, in our work to really center racial justice, to then go ahead and not recognize the intersections of identities, all different identities. So it's something that I noticed now. I didn't notice it before. It's something that I've been learning and growing on. So I just want to point that out because we have children that are non-binary and trans,
all genders,
in early childhood, and all genders, exactly. And so you gotta do this.
Girls like me who like rough play.
Yeah, someone else, Carol mentioned it. I identify she and I was socialized towards rough and tumble play, right? So thank you for that, because it's not the same, but yeah, we want to say these narratives about boys and girls, but we have to remember it doesn't fit all boys and it doesn't fit all girls. And then we have students who are neither and both, and we need to think about that as well.
Thank you for calling us in, Takiema. That's beautiful.
Well, you know what, I think we need to have a lot of complexity around these conversations because it's a both and, right? We have to have specific conversations about Black boys, Black girls, non-binary, Asian, like we have to have specifics because children, all the identities experience these multi-layers of intersections and oppression. And so it's not to say that we can't have the conversations, it's just that that's not the full conversation. Right. And so that's a learning edge. And, you know, we are very much brought up in a binary society. That's how we're socialized, is one or the other. And so that's our work to be like, oh, actually it's many, many different shades. So thank you so much. That was so interesting. And we put the link into the website for Hatch.
And the Instagram. Thank you. Follow their Instagram, which is just great.
So can I
Joy.
Add one other example, one other layer to this, that is that thinking about the systems, right, that we're working within, and the fact, I think of Joan Allman, while she was alive, talked about risk becoming a 4-letter word, and that the systems of so much litigation and so much fear and so much compliance, right, that are making teachers feel so fearful about what's going to happen. But we also have families. I teach a course on play every year. And I have students say, you know, just kind of trouble the narrative of we just need to do our own work. We do need to do our own work to feel comfortable with all the kinds of play that was discussed. But they said, you know, let's remember that we have students who are in families and communities where they're told, it's so important that you not climb the tree or not play that way, because if you get injured, we don't have health insurance and we're undocumented, and it could be a risk to our entire family if you end up, you know, in a situation of injury. So I think there's just a lot of complexity, as you said, to remembering to center the child, the community. This is why I think we've all been talking about partnership, listening, humility, building with, to make room for those stories and to make room for what it really means to be inclusive.
I agree. But I do also find, you know, early childhood people say safety first. And so, I mean, that is their, you know, sort of their mantra. And I understand kids whose parents say, but there's too much control over children's
100%.
Natural inclination. People are always telling children, don't run. You know, and when I'm in a building, I say, slow down. I don't tell them not to run because it's natural to run. You know, I said, you might want to slow down. That's the way I usually say, you might want to slow down. But if they blow me off, I don't care. I mean, they'll bump into a wall, they'll be fine. But every move that a child makes is overseen by an adult, and a controlling adult who is saying, put a bubble on it. You know, kids talking about race, you know, and that's what the segregation by experience. She talks about schools serving Black children, children of color, where the kids are walking with their hands behind their backs and a bubble on where white kids in privileged communities can sing, go down the hall, zigzag, hug one another. I mean, people hide behind safety. I know the difference. I've been at this over 50 years. And I know when someone is serious about protecting children and is serious about controlling children, then there is a difference.
All right. Well, We have one question that Takiema wants to do, or I can do it if you want, but I just want to say for the other questions in the Q&A, I feel like most of those were addressed. People wanted to know, Rukia, do you get pushback from white families? And I know you talked about that. People wanted to know what could we do in higher ed? And I think Takiema mentioned that, and other people have mentioned some of the, read those books, those resources. It goes beyond a single class. Actually, I'm at Sarah Lawrence College, and we don't have a class because we embed it in every part of our program, in all of our courses, in all of our field work, in everything. So I'm looking at that now from that lens. Is it better that way than one class, one semester that feels disjointed from everything else? Or how are we incorporating this throughout your entire 2 years with us? Other colleges, Montclair State, they're actually interviewing people before they go in the program to make sure they don't show up with these color evasive, I just love children attitudes, because they don't have time for that in a year-long program to get you certified. You need to come to the door ready to do the work, right? So there are colleges who are addressing this differently. So I just want to put that out there. But we have a final question that I believe everyone, or Takiema and the panelists, wanted to put to you guys that we would like to end with, and that is, what will you do to center racial justice in early childhood starting in the beginning of your new school year? So we want you to think about that. What are you going to do? What is one thing that you're going to do? You can drop that in the chat. And we'd love to hear it. And while that's going through, we're on our last minute. I'm going to first start by thanking you so much, Takiema, Bunche Smith, Maurice Sykes, Rukia Rogers, and Julie Nicholson. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This was a great way to kick off the 2022 DEY Summer Institute. I think in the past 2 years, we saved this discussion for the last day, and everyone told me to move it to the first day. And they were right, because it is definitely a way to start. And I just want to thank you for your brilliance, your time, your patience, your energy, your flow, all of it was just absolutely amazing. And I think you made this to not be one of those webinars you don't want to be at. And we talked about that, right? So thank you all so much. Please keep adding your stuff on the chat. I'll stay on for a few minutes, but I am going to go ahead now and drop this link. This is a Google Doc that I've been putting resource links on like crazy today. So it starts with overall resources just in general. The link if you want a certificate, the link to the website for the recorded videos, which will be added, the link to our Facebook Live if you want to watch this live video from there, and then the links for resources for day 1. Tomorrow I'll add day 2, and then the last day we'll add day 3. So here is that link. It's all on the Google Doc. I'll also email this to everyone who is registered so that you can have it, and I'll put it in the chat again. But again, please think about what is it that you can do, because this is something we all have to do. And I know there's pushback. Everyone's talking about, it's not critical race theory. It is positive racial identity development. If you can't say you're committed to every child having positive racial identity development, then we don't belong in this field, and this field doesn't belong to exist. That is not something that's being legislated. It's not illegal in any state. Everybody needs it. It's positive racial identity development. It's cultural development. It's ethnic development. And we are the space to do that. And we have to be committed to doing that work. So thank you all so much. Those are the words you can use. If you don't want to get in trouble saying CRT and anti-racism, you say positive racial identity. It's all the same. It's all the same. But we got to use the language that'll get us. And you can read, and I'll add this to the list, Beverly Tatum's book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria, for that as well. All right. Thank you all so much. It's been a wonderful day 1. We will see you back at 4 p.m. Eastern for day 2.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's me. L, so lovable and magnificent.